It's time for the Freedom in 5 Minutes podcast. Powerful and liberating business strategies you can start in 5 minutes or less. Now, here's your host, Dean Soto.
Hey, this is Dean Soto, founder of FreedomIn5Minutes.com and prosulum.com, prosulum.com. And we're here again with another Freedom in 5 Minutes podcast episode. Today's topic is this: frustration can be your friend. That and more coming up. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, whatever time it is for you. Oh my goodness, it has been a fantastic last few days. However, there was a particularly frustrating moment. So I never grew up building anything. My hands are sweet and supple and soft, and they feel like a baby's butt. At least they used to up until a few years ago. So over time, my wife, her father, my father-in-law, is a general contractor. And over time, after being married for over a decade, he has taught me quite a bit of how to build things. Now, I'm not able to, at least not yet, able to build a full-on house or anything like that. However, I'm pretty handy now. Pretty handy. Or so I thought. If you've been following for a while, you know that we live on some acreage. We moved out here about 3 years ago, and we have about 20 acres. And we have about 5 of those acres fenced off, and eventually we're going to fence off the rest of the 20 acres. But for now, we have 5 acres fenced off, and I've been building a lot of things for this homestead, right? There was a couple of things that we talked about in the previous podcast, like the water system, the garden enclosure, things that have really brought us to the next level when it comes to homesteading and being self-sufficient. And and so one of the things that I needed to build, because we have gophers and squirrels and other things like that, was I wanted to build what is called a feral cat house. And I think I might have mentioned this in other podcasts. I wanted to build this feral cat shelter. And these are for cats who, you know, they're the SPCA or a local shelter has them, and they're just so wild or unfriendly to people that really nobody's going to take them. And so it's either they find someone to finally take them, or they have to put the cats down, right? And so my idea was, look, I can build a nice, beautiful house for these guys and make it. I was going to insulate it. I'm going to insulate it. Going to make it nice and warm, even in the cool of the cold of the winter, and it'll be insulated as well, and have some windows and things like that for the summertime when it gets really hot over here, and they can use that shelter as a means to live. We give them food, we give them milk. That's where they would eat. That's where they would sleep, or water or whatever. And it would be big enough to where we would have a good amount of them, like 4 or 5 of them, right? And so I started building this thing. So it's 4 foot by 8 foot. So it's about 4 foot wide by 8 foot long. The foundation is cinder block. So the cinder blocks all support the I forgot what that's called, basically the flooring of this thing. And so it's raised off of the ground, so it's not going to be super cold on the ground or anything like that. And the water will run through so that there's no corruption or whatever, that corroding of the wood and so on and so forth. So the thing's on cinder blocks, and everything went according to plan. Foundation took forever to do, which it always does. You always want to make that the best, the top priority. So that took a while. And then I built the floor, and then I built the walls. Then I got to the roof. And I realized I've never built a gabled roof before. And if you're wondering what the heck is a gabled roof, I was wondering the exact same thing. I could have put just a metal roof on, go get some, scrap metal or whatever and put a nice metal roof on that thing. But I wanted to learn how to create a gabled roof. And a gabled roof is where it's diagonal. It looks like, a cone, or it's like what you see on a normal house. That, it's one of those houses that the roof has an angle to it, so the water runs off of it or snow runs off of it and so on and so forth. I wanted to do a gabled roof like that and then put on some of the composite shingles on it as well, so that I learned how to do that, so that when I build a bigger structure, I'd know exactly how to run those rafters, right? The rafters being the wood that's used as the support or the foundation of the roof. All right, so I realized I have no idea how to do this. How do I make that angled cut? How do I know what that angled cut's going to be? How do I know how high, just how to do any of it, right? So I got to that point. I was all excited before that. I'm getting there and I'm like, wow, okay, great. This thing's looking great. Got the whole rectangle frame all built and everything. And it was awesome. It looks great. You really have to come see it. Very quickly, right when I got to that part, I'm like, oh crap, I really don't know what I'm doing. And it frustrated me. I sat there looking at the thing for a while going, how do I do this? So I went and searched YouTube videos. I went and tried to find things on how to create these rafters, right? And how to do the angles. And I found this one. Where the guy, it's like a 4-part or 5-part series, really good series on how to build a shed. And in part 3, he talks about creating these roof rafters. And he basically, part of it is using the Pythagorean theorem. I'm not joking. Using the Pythagorean theorem to find out the angle that you need to cut for these roof rafters. And I'm like, what? I never thought I would ever use that ever in anything that I do. I thought it was just some stupid thing that I would learn in geometry or learn in algebra or whatever and have to forget. Well, no, you actually have to use it. A squared plus B squared equals C squared. And so I started calculating based off of the slope that I was going to do. It was going to be a 612 slope. Based off of the slope that I was going to do. So every 6 inches, there's a 12 inch. Every 6 inches that you go, you have to raise it up by, so every 12 inches, every foot that you go, you have to raise, your elevation is going to be 6 inches. So anyway, I calculate all the numbers. I'm still getting frustrated. I try to FaceTime my dad, my father-in-law. He responds with a video and gives me advice, and I finally kind of started getting it, but I was just so frustrated with the thing. And a big part of my frustration was being afraid to actually do it, being afraid to actually try and to put it up there. And and so once I got the video back from my father-in-law, he was like, it started to click. It kind of started to click. But yeah, the last couple of days, because of this, I have just been stressed out. I mean, there's a lot of other things to stress out. I mean, it's a friggin' cat shelter. But yet I'm getting frustrated and stressed out on this one thing. So I do all of the calculations for this thing. And one of the things that my father said, which is totally in line with the concepts in at freedomin5minutes.com and in prosulum.com, prosulum.com, is the idea that you do it once, and once you've done it and you've figured out the process, every other one is going to be the exact same, right? So long and the short is, I put this long beam that went the long way on the cat shelter. So it was actually a 10-foot beam that went across, basically went right down the center along along the length of the cat shelter. So it was raised up 12 inches, so a foot above the rest of the shelter. And I supported it in these with these 2x4s that were all notched and everything like that. And so that ran down the center, and that was what the angled cuts for these rafters were going to connect to. So I did all the calculations, I did one cut, and realized that the calculations were wrong and they didn't work. And it's either because the calculations were wrong or I was wrong. More than likely, it was probably me. But I saw that the angle was there was a gap in the angle, and I could guesstimate. I could estimate how many degrees I needed to change my saw to make that the angle actually work. So I tried it again, went to the back to the cat shelter. It was closer, and tried it again, and it was closer. And finally, after about 3 times, I found the degree of cut that I needed to make this rafter. Now, if it were me, I should have done that in the very beginning. Just do an angle and then see how far off you are, and start getting closer and closer by changing the pitch that you're using on your saw. But no, I wanted to do it the right way and get all the calculations and everything like that. So anyway, I finished the cut, and it was great. I finally found the correct pitch to cut these pieces. Once I did that, every single other one that I had to do was exactly the same. And so that initial frustration, the initial creativity, it showed me 2 things. The first is that as the builder, as the creator, it's my job to figure out what the actual process is. It's my job. I can't delegate it to anybody else. I mean, I could pay someone else to do it, but in this particular circumstance, and in most other circumstances, I'm the one that has to figure out the process. I'm the one that has to figure out the methodology of how something works. And the second thing was that although it was frustrating, although it took time, although it took me having to spend the time to initially create the process, once that process was done, I could hand that off I can give I can give the angled pitch to anybody and say, "Here, cut me a piece of wood with this angle on each of them at this length." And whether it was my wife or somebody who's helping me, once I found out what it was, I could hand that off and they can do it over and over and over again, and the job would get done much more quickly. It empowers me to do it, but more importantly, it empowers other people to do it as well. And so, why is all this important? It's important because the frustration that I was feeling in the very beginning is very similar to the frustration that a lot of business owners, maybe like yourself, feel when you're coming up with that new way of marketing, or coming up with that new way of advertising, or coming up with that new structure of operations, new processes and things like that. You're sitting there and you're figuring out these things, and you're part of your frustration is the creative aspect of it. And the more that you become frustrated with the thing, frustration is not your enemy. It's actually your friend, because the more that you dive into this new thing that you are creating, the frustration is that there's still a lot of unknowns. But once you push through those unknowns and you figure out how to build what you want to build, from there, once you've created the process, now you can actually record the process, have the thing documented, and you can have other people do it. The frustration, the bad type of frustration, is when you've already figured out how to do something. You've already created how to do something, and you do it over and over and over again, and you get frustrated because you are doing this mundane task, and you're doing something that really is not valuable as the time, as what your personal time is worth. Okay, that's the bad type of frustration. And so this week, what type of frustration are you feeling? Is it a frustration of creativity and not exactly knowing the process, and you're trying to figure it out, and you're trying to figure out the strategy behind certain things? Or is it the frustration of doing something over and over and over and over and over again and being the bottleneck in your business? One type of frustration is good. The other type of frustration is bad and not worth the value that you bring to the table. So this is Dean Soto. Go check out freedomin5minutes.com. Hey, if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, go to Google and type in Freedom in 5 Minutes podcast and subscribe via iTunes. If you type in Freedom in 5 Minutes podcast Spotify, you can subscribe on Spotify. And you can even go to Google, type in Freedom in 5 Minutes podcast Stitcher, and subscribe on Stitcher Radio. Whatever works for you, make sure that you subscribe, and go check out freedomin5minutes.com. There is a lot of good stuff over there. We have classes. We have a business process scorecard that shows you the exact amount of money that you are leaving on the table if you are still doing all of this stuff that we've been talking about in this podcast. And go check out prosulum.com if you want to have true freedom in 5minutes.com, prosulum.com. All right, so this is Dean Soto, Freedom in 5 Minutes podcast. I will catch you on the next Freedom in 5 Minutes podcast episode.
Thanks for listening to the Freedom in 5 Minutes podcast. head over to www.freedomin5minutes.com and register for our free masterclass and discover how to start systemizing and automating your entire business 5 minutes at a time. We'll see you next time on the Freedom in 5 Minutes podcast.